Okay, thank you. Well, it's good to be on a Zoom call and getting ready to head to the Board of Governors meeting this afternoon, tomorrow, and then off to home for a couple of days, and off to Nashville on Sunday. And exciting time of year for the franchise with 3 first-round picks, and it's guys have done a lot of work to get to this point. We're ready to move ahead, so I can answer any questions you might have since our last conversation about how we're preparing or what we're doing.
Hey, Doug, it's Jeremy. Hope you're doing well. Last time I spoke to you a couple months ago, I was asking you about, are there players out there, established NHL players available, who might be acquired for the later first-round picks? And you were saying the season had just ended. Teams weren't in that mindset yet. Assuming that you've done all that homework since then, just are there players out there that pique your interest that you think could be good fits in that position?
We haven't. There's nothing that's come across our desk that we've seriously considered yet, and that doesn't mean it won't happen between now and before those picks are taken. I think a lot of teams are, obviously I'm feeling a lot of calls on our picks, all 3 picks, quite honestly, and letting people know what we want, and then they go back to work and see if there's a fit. But no one's brought to us anything that would perk our interest as of yet. But that's not abnormal. Usually things will start picking up probably Monday.
Doug, it's Matt DeFrance. I think last month you talked about kind of the style of play, and when the smaller players kind of had an advantage because they skated better, and now the bigger players have learned to skate better. So when you look at small prospects for this draft, what skills can they possess to kind of make up for that difference?
Well, I think you have to have speed, certainly, and hockey IQ. You have to, smaller players need to think the game a little quicker. They need to stay a step ahead of the competition. They can't put themselves in areas where size and strength can be a detriment to how they play. So I think hockey IQ is a huge factor, and tight area quickness, tight area being elusive to get out of areas where there's bigger bodies, longer limbs is very important. But I would say hockey IQ and a quickness factor.
Doug, it's Lou. Just curious, I'm under the assumption you went to the Combine in Buffalo, and just what are some of your takeaways after meeting with some of these prospects? Anything stand out to you about some of these guys?
Yeah, I think from when we started doing the Combine, now the players are very well schooled. They're much more in tune with this process that we go through. I think their agents do a great job in preparing them. There's really not a lot of difference right now in these interviews, quite honestly. But it's always great to get to meet people, to ask them about their path to this point. But the guys are all very well schooled on the answers that they want to give. And just the excitement, that one thing that hasn't changed. It's the excitement of the draft, the excitement of fulfilling a dream of getting drafted potentially. And then, that's just a starting point of then going back and signing a contract and turning pro. But there's still a naivety with each of these players of what pro sports is and hockey. And it's a joy to watch the true passion and the love of the game come out when you talk to them.
Doug, what are your overall thoughts on this year's group of D, the draftees, defensemen? And it seems like a lot of the forwards get the attention, but what are just your thoughts on the D group?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of forwards in the top 10, and then there might be a pretty normal split, I think, between 11 to the end of the first round. There's some good D there. There's some smaller defensemen that got unbelievable puck skills and creativity, and there's some bigger body defensemen too. So there's a little bit for everybody in that group. But I think the run of defensemen likely will start, a little bit later than it does normally. But there will be definitely more than one handful of D likely taken in the first round.
Doug, you said you've been fielding some calls about your picks. Do you still feel as strongly that you'll make that number 10 pick as you did a month or so ago, or could things change?
Yeah, no, I feel strongly about that. Again, we're pretty honed in on what it would take to get to remove that pick from us, and that's we haven't had any conversations with anyone to move back. That and to fairness to the other teams, moving back is something that you do at the table. So at pick 10, I expect to hear from people at about pick 8, maybe 7. That okay, there's a couple of guys there. I think in this draft, I think most mock drafts have the top 4 non-Russian players all have the same top 4. Or I would say that well over the majority of them do have the same top 4, and then it starts to deviate a little bit. So you're looking probably pick 5 through 10. If you have 8 guys in that group and 3 or 4 are there, or 3 are there, or 2 are there at pick 7 or 8, I might start to hear from guys, but I don't expect to do that at the draft. And we'll have to have a comfort level on how far we're willing to move back and what that asset is to make it worthwhile.
So you mentioned the Russians there. Do you have any hesitation about drafting Russian guys so highly?
We haven't in the past. I think that obviously the political climate is a little bit different, and top-rated Russian player has a long-term contract that I assume he's going to honor. I assume they're going to make him honor it. That's 3 years. And we haven't had live scouting on him for a while too. So this year's dynamic is different. But in general, I think that these players are so far away from playing that I wouldn't run scared of drafting Russians.
Hey, Doug, Steve Wino, just following up on that. Like, what's the calculus? You obviously drafted a Russian player last year. What's the calculus in knowing that some of these guys you're drafting out of junior or college might also take 3 years, and maybe development in a Russian pro league like the KHL might also kind of be beneficial?
Yeah, we don't, again, depending where you're drafting, like 3 years is a fast track, quite honestly, for anybody probably outside the top 15 to be impact players. So I remember, again, dating myself when I started, that you wouldn't even consider bringing any European players over until they had played for their national team in the 90s. You'd let them develop there. You'd let them go through, get into the men's league, be a good men's league player, pay for their national team, and come over at 23 or 24. Now we obviously fast track that. I think with free agency at 27, you want to get these guys in the league as quick as possible because you only have them for a finite amount of time. But I have no problem in European players developing in their home country at their own pace.
Doug, how much is the lack of live views a factor? I mean, you can see the stats, you can see what he's done in certain leagues, you can read all you want, but the fact that you haven't seen him perhaps a lot, how much does that weigh in?
Well, it's the live views, and it's also the meetings. It's also getting to talk to people around them. It's been shut down. We're relying very heavily on our scout from that area and other contacts, but it's definite secondhand information, and it's not as much as the live views. It's being able to have communication when you see them at tournaments. They haven't been participating in the Ivan Halinka, the U18s, the Subway Series that goes through Canada. So there's a lot of live views that aren't there, and there's also a lot of getting to know people and getting to know them from different tournaments that's not there either. So it's certainly probably pre-Cold War Russia scouting than it is post-Cold War.
Hi, Doug. Guillaume Lefrançois of La Presse in Montreal. If I may piggyback on that, I was just wondering to what extent the amount of contact that you would have with a Russian player's team might have an impact on the development. Like, how much control do you feel you can have over a player's development in today's world, given, the level of discussions you have with those teams?
Yeah, I would say well, I know I wouldn't assume that we would be able to have a Russian team change their development plans or play a player differently if he's not getting enough ice time because we call and request that. But that hasn't been pre or post pandemic. That's always. And quite honestly, in Finland and Sweden and other countries too, it's very difficult to to get players. You know, we drafted a player last year. I went to watch him playing the Finnish Elite League. He didn't get a shift. That happens. You know, they brought him up from the junior team, and that they decided not to play him that day. But that's the rub of the green. You just hope that the overall development, the summer training, and that stuff puts them further ahead. But to think that you can force their hand into trades or force their hand into playing him in different situations. Let's say you see him as a centerman and play him in the middle. They want him on the wing. You have to just understand that they own the player and they're going to do what they think is best. And if you believe you can't, that's not acceptable, then you have to try and sign the player and get him to North America. But that's sort of counter to what I said before. Is it's nice to have those guys develop in their own countries at their own pace.
All right, thank you.
Hey, Doug, from the outside looking in, and you've said yourself that you're going to have a lot of options. You know, some of those options might make you more competitive next year or the year after. Some of the decisions might make you competitive in 2, 3, 4 years. What's going to determine what routes you take with some of these decisions?
I think the quality of player we can get, how we view the short and long term. We are trying to feed 2 masters right now, get competitive as quick as possible, and have the longest window open available when some of our younger players start to mature. And that's sometimes a tricky situation. What we don't want to try and do is jam a square peg into a round hole. And so if the trades don't make sense, if we can't see the value of, let's say, trading for a player with multiple years on his contract, knowing that we're going to get value throughout that and he can help with the development, we're not going to do it. Or we're not going to, you know, do we trade for a 25-year-old and give up a valuable asset knowing that we have him for this year and next year? Probably not something that we would look to do. So I think it's the term on the contract, it's age and term, and I think those go hand in hand. I think when you're looking at forwards prime years 24 to 29, defenseman prime years 26 to 31, you want to get, if you're trading future assets, you want to get players that are going to sort of fit in that window for as long as possible. And so that's what we'll look at do if we move these picks, and if we don't get the proper player, we're more than happy to select, put more assets in the development area, and then see what's available in free agency and see what's available via trade, and if not, we'll build internally.
Doug, when we talk about acquiring these types of players, their cap hit's probably not going to fit into your current cap structure. Have you found it more difficult to find the right player to acquire, or to create kind of that cap space in order to fit them in?
I think that all 32 teams now understand the cap system, and very rarely does anyone make a phone call not knowing what the team's cap situation is, and then have an idea on how to placate the situation, saying, I can take this player, would he be available as part of the salary needed to go the other way to make this deal happen? And so I think everybody understands what we have to deal with, and you don't get many teams offering $10 million players when they know you're at the cap for a draft pick. It's a wasted phone call. There has to be some business side of the cap that's involved in every discussion.
Any final questions?
Oh, Roger, I didn't want to veer off path. I know this is about the draft, but if we didn't get a chance to ask Doug about the new coaching hires, Doug, if you had 1 second.
Sure.
Coach Weber and Coach Babcock, and specifically Coach Babcock, would he be on the bench? I wouldn't think so, being a skills guy, but if you could answer that. Yeah,
that's going to be up to Craig. My understanding is that he'll be upstairs during the game, working as an eye in the sky. He's done that in the past in Ottawa when he was there. His main job responsibilities are going to be working pre and post practice on skill areas and helping players individually. But also he's gonna help the organization in different ways. But being on the bench, that's not something that I think Craig envisions right now, and nor do I. But that's all subject to change as Craig gets a feel for him and how he's fitting into our group.
And a thought on Coach Weber?
Yeah, obviously someone that's had a quick rise to the NHL from the coaching, whether it be in junior hockey or in the American Hockey League. Doing my research when Craig brought his name, knowing lots of people around the league, he comes with a really excellent reputation. One of the things that came back from managers that had him as a player and players that played with him is his work ethic, his attention to detail in that area, and then also in coaching. He's got a passion for it. He understands today's player. So I think he's going to be a good fit to try and not only develop our younger guys, but understand maybe what some of our veterans are going through and can help push and prod them to get back to the level that gives them the best chance to have success.